A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask Assembly Member Gatto to offer the day's prayer.
Father, as we begin this difficult week, we place ourselves in your hands. Whatever may come our way during the course of these days, let it be the result of diligent work, serious concern, and abiding charity. Then, be it painful or joyful, it will be your will and our will, and consequently, it will bring us peace and harmony. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to continue to stand and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assembly Member Jeffries as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Jeffries. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Friday, August 27, 2010. The Assembly met at 10 a.m. Honorable Fiona Ma, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Assistant Clerk Timothy Moore. Then reading the roll was called. Adams, Amiano, Anderson, Arambula, Bass, Bell, Bill Berryhill, Tom Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Caballero, Carter, Chesbrough,
Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Garrick seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the Governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Calderon, you're recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, first order of business, I request unanimous consent for Assembly Members Gaines, Gilmore, Silva, and Swanson to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
Without objection.
Also, I request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Member Adams and Anderson to have a guest at their desk and a photographer on the floor.
Without objection.
Mr. Blumenfield has asked to speak on adjourn in memory, and so I request unanimous consent for that purpose.
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent to suspend the rules to withdraw AB 1609 by Mr. Blumenfield from the Budget Committee and order the bill to third reading.
Without objection.
I also request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Fuhr to take up file item 2, SB 1192 by Ms. Orpeza, without reference to file for the purpose of amendment today.
Without objection. Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Both those rule waivers, we reject that and ask for roll call votes. Both the AB 1609 Blumenfield from budget to third reading and 1192 Orpeza. Is that the one we just moved?
Okay, we'll take up the first motion to suspend the rules to withdraw AB 1609. It will take 41 votes. Mr. Calderon's asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. This is a procedural motion. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Mr. Calderon moves a call. And on the second motion to allow Mr. Fiore to take up file item 2, SB 1192, or Oropesa, without reference to file, Mr. Calderon's asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. This takes 40 votes. Members, if you could please come to the floor. We need all members to the floor to vote on these procedural motions. Mr. Calderon moves the call. Business on the daily file. Second reading, clerk will read.
Senate Bill 127, 1192, 1456, 5 with amendments, 675 with amendments, and Senate Bill 1381 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring the following bills to committee. File item 13, AB 1653, Jones, to the Health Committee. SB 1072, Calderon, to Government Organization and Appropriations Committee. File item 106, SB 847, Steinberg, to Education and Appropriations Committee. And file item 14, AB 635, Accountability and Administrative Review, to the Business Professions and Consumer Protections Committee. Mr. Adams? Mr. Adams has a guest. Mr. Adams, please introduce your guest.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members of the Assembly and our friends from all over the state of California, it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome a very important guest to the floor of our hallowed chamber here. None other than a woman who has managed to tolerate me and love me for 18 years, notwithstanding a whole litany of things that would cause any reasonable person to stop. But she's a delight. She's the apple of my eye. She's my wife, Deanna Adams, and it is her birthday.
Members, if we can direct our attention to the rear of the chamber, Mr. Swanson has his guests he would like to introduce.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm here with Assemblymember Bradford and Assemblymember Davis and Assemblymember Carter. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We wanted to introduce to the Chamber and to California the 2010 California Legislative Black Caucus Leadership Scholarship winners. They will receive a scholarship as well as a computer. Many of them are from throughout California. They are our future leaders. Please welcome them and give them a round of applause. Congratulations. Thank you very much, members. They're going to be attending a seminar at 1:30 in room 444 with a number of corporate leaders and other community leaders to talk about career opportunities, and it's just an honor to have them here in the Capitol with us. Thank you very much, members.
Mr. Calderon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow the Appropriations Committee to meet during session or upon call of the chair to hear SB 847 by Mr. Steinberg and SB 1072 by Mr. Calderon in a room to be determined.
Without objection.
Also, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow the Governmental Organization Committee to meet during session or upon call of the chair to hear SB 1072 by Calderon in a room to be determined.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe we don't have light. We're objecting to this at this time and ask for a roll call vote.
On all of these?
Is there a second to Mr. Calderon's motion? Mr. Ruskin? This requires 40 votes to waive the file notice. Mr. Calderon asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asks for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asks for a no vote to suspend the file notice requirements. Members, this is a procedural motion. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman's asking for a no vote. Requires 40 votes. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 40, noes 21. Consent has been granted to waive the file notice requirements to allow the GO committee to meet during session to hear SB 1072 without objection. Mr. Calderon.
Also request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow the Health Committee to meet during session or upon call of the chair to hear SB 1653 by Mr. Jones in a room to be determined.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow the Business Professions and Consumer Protection Committee to meet during session or upon call of the chair to hear file item 7AB 635 by the Assembly Accountability and Administrative Review Committee in a room to be determined.
Without objection?
And finally, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow the Assembly Revenue and Taxation Committee to hold a joint informational hearing with the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee on Wednesday, September 1st at 1 p.m. in room 4203 regarding Governor Schwarzenegger's tax reform proposal.
Without objection? Okay, let's lift the call on the motion to withdraw AB 1609, suspend the rules on the Blumenfield bill. Clerk will post. Mr. Calderon's asking for an aye vote on this procedural motion. Mr. Hagman's asking for a no vote. It requires 41 votes. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 19. Unanimous consent has been granted to suspend the rules to withdraw AB 1609 Blumenfield from the Budget Committee to third reading. And let's lift the call on the other motion. Clerk will post. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote on this procedural motion. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 40, noes 22. To allow Mr. Fuhrer to take up file item 2, SB 1192, or Oropesa without reference to file for purposes of amendment today. Okay, members, we have 4 committees that are going to meet right now. We will let you go back to your offices if you are not on a committee, but as soon as we call session, if members can come back, because we have a long night. Mr. Nielsen, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, just for a brief introduction of a former colleague, if I may.
Without objection.
In the back of the room is former State Senator Dan McCorkadale of the 12th Senate District, a longtime colleague of ours.
Welcome. Okay, the following committees will be meeting right now. Business, Professions, and Consumer Protection will meet in room 447. Business, Professions, and Consumer Protection, room 447. Governmental Organization will meet in 4202. GO, room 4202. Health Committee will meet in room 437. Health Committee, room 437. And Local Government will meet in room 127. Local Government in room 127. When we come back, we will take up Senate items, and the appropriations will also meet in room 4202 after Governmental Organization. Appropriations will meet in room 4202 after the Governmental Organization meets in that same room, room 4202. You'll vote for it?